Have you ever just stopped and wondered, how can I be absolutely 100% sure about anything? I mean, really sure. It's a question we all wrestle with, but it's not new. In fact, there was a point in history where this question became so intense, so urgent, that it basically shattered the old world and gave birth to what we now call modern philosophy. So let's go back to that moment and check out this incredible quest for certainty.
Okay, just think about that for a second. Imagine that some evil demon with unlimited power is spending all its time trying to trick you about everything you see, feel, and believe. It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But for the philosopher René Descartes, this wasn't just a crazy idea. It was a serious mental tool he used to deal with the biggest crisis of knowledge his world had ever faced.
So, what caused this crisis? What shattered this world of certainty? Well, for hundreds of years, the answer to the question, what's true, was actually pretty simple, almost comforting. You just had to look to one single powerful source that had all the answers. For the better part of 1,000 years in Europe, the Church was the ultimate source of truth. And we're not just talking about faith. It explained how the universe worked, it laid down the rules for morality, it gave everyone a stable, unquestioned reality to live in. But, as you can probably guess, the ground underneath that foundation was about to start shaking.
And it wasn't just one thing, it was like a series of intellectual earthquakes, one after another. First, you get the Renaissance, which starts putting humanity, not God, at the center of the story. Then, in politics, Machiavelli comes along and says, hey, maybe rulers shouldn't have to play by Christian rules. Then, boom, the Reformation happens, and suddenly there isn't just one church anymore. And then, maybe the biggest blow of all came from science. Copernicus and Galileo proved the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, which was such a shocking idea that Galileo actually got thrown in prison for it.
So with all the old rules gone, thinkers suddenly found themselves in what one of them called a whirlpool of universal doubt. I mean, can you imagine? They were completely lost, with no compass to guide them. They desperately needed a new foundation for knowledge, something that absolutely could not be shaken.
And right here, this is the question that defines the entire era. Just put yourself in their shoes. If everything you've ever been taught could be wrong, or even a deliberate lie, where do you even start looking for truth? How can you possibly trust your own eyes when science is telling you they're fooling you about the very ground you're standing on?
And this is where our hero, René Descartes, steps onto the stage. He was this brilliant mathematician and philosopher who looked at all this chaos and decided to face it head-on. And his plan was, well, it was pretty radical. He figured that to build knowledge back up from scratch, he first had to tear everything down.
And this became his famous method of doubt. The rule was simple. If he could find even the slightest reason to doubt a belief, he would just toss it out and treat it as totally false. He started with the easy stuff, his senses. We all know they can trick us, right? Then he went bigger. What if my entire life is just one long, complicated dream? And then, for the final boss level of doubt, he brings back that evil demon from the start, a being whose only job is to fool him about reality itself.
And then, right there, in the deepest part of that whirlpool of doubt, he found it. The one solid, immovable point he was looking for. He realized that even if an evil demon was trying to deceive him, there had to be a him for the demon to deceive in the first place.
This was the big breakthrough. You've probably heard it summed up as, I think, therefore I am. The simple, undeniable fact that he was thinking, even if that thinking was just doubting or being tricked, was absolute proof that he, the thinker, had to exist. This was it. This was the bedrock, the solid ground he was searching for. And from here, he was going to try and rebuild all of human knowledge.
So Descartes' huge discovery laid the groundwork for the first major school of thought to come out of this whole mess, Rationalism. You can think of them as team reason, and their answer to the problem of knowledge was basically to look inside your own head.
So the rationalists took what Descartes did and just ran with it. They argued that our senses are, fundamentally unreliable. We can't trust them. For them, the only tool we have that's actually trustworthy is our own mind. Real, certain knowledge doesn't come from looking at the world, it comes from thinking about it, using logic and pure reason.
Thinkers, like Descartes and another guy named Leibniz, both of them were amazing mathematicians. They looked at math and said, that's it. That's the perfect model for knowledge, right? You don't need to go out and do experiments to know that 2 + 2 = 4. You can figure it out just by thinking. They believed our minds are born with certain innate ideas already in them, or at least with the power to figure out universal truths without ever having to see them in the real world.
But not everybody was on board with this whole just sit and think approach. Across the English Channel, a rival team was forming, and they had a completely different, and they thought, much more common sense answer to the problem.
This slide pretty much sums up the great philosophical showdown of the 17th century. On one side, you've got Team Reason, led by Descartes, saying that knowledge starts with ideas that are already inside our heads. And on the other side, you've got Team Experience, led by John Locke, arguing that no, the mind starts out as a total blank.
This rival idea is called empiricism, and its core belief is that we don't know anything except what we get through our five senses. No innate ideas, no pre-installed software. Every single concept you have in your head, from what an apple is to what justice means, is built up piece by piece from the raw data you get from seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling.
John Locke had this incredible way of describing it. He said to imagine the mind as white paper, a totally blank sheet. And he asked, okay, if the mind starts out empty, how does it get filled up with all the amazing, complex ideas that we have? His answer was simple: experience.
This concept got a Latin name, tabula rasa, which literally means blank slate. For the empiricists, we aren't born with knowledge of God or geometry. We're born as empty hard drives, and the world writes on us through our experiences.
And this idea from Francis Bacon basically became the empiricists' motto. They were telling the rationalists, hey, stop sitting in your armchair just thinking about stuff. Go outside, observe the world, run experiments, collect data. For them, experience is the only proof that matters.
Okay, but what happens when you take this idea that all we can ever truly know is what our senses tell us, and you follow it all the way to its logical conclusion? Well, things get really weird.
This is the Irish philosopher George Berkeley. He looked at what Locke was saying and just pushed it one step further. He asked a really clever question. If all we ever actually have access to are our own perceptions, our own ideas in our head, how can we prove that there's a physical world out there causing those ideas?
Berkeley's conclusion was mind-bending. He argued that we have zero justification for believing in a physical universe at all. He said things only exist when they are being perceived. This leads to that classic puzzle. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Berkeley would say no. In fact, the tree itself doesn't even exist unless someone or something is perceiving it. So what stops a room from vanishing the moment you close the door? Berkeley had an answer for that: God. God is always perceiving everything, all the time, holding all of reality in existence simply by thinking about it.
So this intense battle between reason and experience, between Descartes and Locke, between the mind and the senses, it didn't just stay in the 17th century. It fundamentally shaped the world we live in today.
The scientific method itself is a direct product of this whole debate. It's a perfect mix of rationalist theories and empirical experiments. But that core question, that quest for certainty, it has not gone away. If anything, in our world of AI, deep fakes, and what people call alternative facts, that 17th century hunt for a solid foundation feels more important than ever. So the question Descartes asked all those years ago is now ours to answer. In a world where both our senses and our reason can be manipulated, what, if anything, can we truly be certain of?